Hi everyone, Agnes here, and guess who's back with me? Hello, Amy.
Hi. Hi, Agnes. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again. It's
You too. I'm really excited to be back on with you and having our conversations and chats.
Yep. And today we have got hopefully a discussion that will give people some relief from anxiety, from emotional pain, and from ongoing repetitive patterns. So, what we're going to talk about today is most effective methods for a lasting relationship. Now, for those of you that don't know my background or Amy's, both of us have been in long term lasting relationships for quite some time. And we're going to share some of our own stories during this discussion to basically help you and give you relief with what you're currently going through right at the moment. So, Amy, we're going to start this, we said, with looking at when people get stuck in these reoccurring patterns and toxic patterns. Maybe they've had that with exes and now they've got it with someone in the current moment. And they are really discouraged because it's happening again and again and again. So, where do you want to start with this? Because this is a really, really good topic to free people from what they're going through if it's painful.
Well, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that it is incredibly painful, and it is like being on an emotional roller coaster, and it can make you feel terrible. I mean, especially like you said, if you've been in a relationship before with toxic patterns and you've got with somebody else and the same thing's happening again, it is really hard because, I always say the hardest thing to do is to look at yourself. It is the hardest thing to do, and I didn't want to do it. And, I didn't want to sort of take responsibility. It was all him. It was easier to blame the other person. Now, I'm not saying that the other person's completely innocent. And I mean, especially if it's abusive patterns that are going on, it's important to mention, I think, that, that isn't your fault. It's just a pattern. And I think it's also important to sort of see where the pattern is coming from. So the first thing I would recommend doing, and I'm saying this with so much love because, I really, really avoided doing this. But I asked myself, what does this remind me of? So when we're talking about toxic relationship patterns, so what we're talking about really is sort of on and off relationships, hot and cold behavior, breadcrumbing, for example. If these things are happening to you, ask yourself what this reminds you of, and you will get to sort of the beginning of where it all started. But I also think it's really important to ascertain what taking responsibility really means, because particularly in the manifestation community, there's a lot of, well, it's you pushed out, well, it must be you. And, it causes people to go into a state of really self-blame, blaming themselves for these awful things that are happening. And I just want to say to anybody who is going through this, is that it isn't, say, for example, if you're suffering with a partner who is stonewalling you, for example, that doesn't mean that, oh, I must stonewall. It doesn't mean that, oh, if they're being abusive, that must mean that I'm abusive. What I mean by taking responsibility is by saying, okay, what does this remind me of? Because it's somewhere in your subconscious mind, this behavior is familiar. And what I personally found was that a lot of the behaviors I was experiencing with my partner was actually the same as what I was experiencing when I was young with my father.
Yeah.
So when we're saying taking responsibility, it doesn't mean blame yourself. It doesn't mean, really beating yourself with a stick or, oh my gosh, this is my fault. I need to change. I need to do this. But rather processing where it all started. So, like I said, mine all started with my father. So what I did was go within, do the inner child work, and process what had happened then as a child. And what I found was, once I'd gone in and done that, and I'd seen the situation differently, and seen the situation as a way to heal the relationship with my current partner, it actually happened by itself just through the healing work. So when we're saying taking responsibility, what we really mean is going within and seeing where this pattern actually started and healing that pattern. Does that make sense?
I agree with you. You know, it's interesting, having been sick lately, I had a really good example of a situation with my father. At one point, they were staying with me and I was outside weeding. My mum and dad were staying with me when they came back from overseas. And I was weeding, and my dad came over with this liquid weed kill. And he started helping me. And I got instantly annoyed with him because I thought, here we go again. What I'm doing is not good enough, and he's better than me, and he's criticizing my way of doing it. Now, he wasn't saying any of that. And I said, no, I don't need that. And I kind of slapped him with my words, and he went, oh. And then he just kind of walked off. And it was only years later, when he died, that I realized he was actually trying to help me. And I just took it as criticism, and I didn't handle that very well. So, you know, I was thinking, wow, it's so interesting how we view things, and how what is actually happening, it can be totally different things. And, you know, when you have a history of being criticized, were you really criticized? I'm starting to question, was I really being criticized? Because I took everything as a criticism, and that I'm not good enough because someone was trying to show me how to do something better. And rather than listening, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And, you know, because I felt the same way. I felt like I was heavily criticized. So it didn't take a lot for, I mean, yes. I can remember once my partner saying, oh, I prefer your hair down than up. And it really irked me. And I felt quite hurt, actually, that he'd say that, because I took it as a criticism, whereas he was just saying, oh, I just prefer you with your hair down.
Yeah.
But these overreactions, I suppose, they're never really overreactions, because what's really happening is that you are reliving how you felt back then and pasting it over what's happening now.
Yes.
So when I was criticized as a child, you know, the way that I healed that was, you know, understanding that the criticism made me feel not enough, not good enough, unworthy, stupid, a disappointment as well. That's how I felt. And yes, you know, my parents probably were trying to help me the best that they could. So yeah. They probably could have said it differently.
Some
or,
of the time,
you know, done differently. But it's, you know, the idea of me being a disappointment, I certainly don't think that now. I mean, my relationship with my parents is brilliant now.
Yes.
But, you know, another pattern that used to show up for me was abandonment. I would always get left.
Yeah.
My husband left me, my partner left me. So this was another pattern. And I think this is one that a lot of people experience, the pattern of being abandoned.
Yes.
And, you know, again, I had to really go into the past as to where this started from. And it started from childhood, where, you know, I was felt emotionally abandoned by my parents, because, you know, they were busy. They were busy parents. They did work full time.
Yes.
And because of how young I was, I perceived that as abandonment. They've abandoned me.
Yeah.
And that's just a belief that I took on, that I acted from in my relationships. So, you know, it became like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Until I could go back and actually see, well, actually, I wasn't abandoned. They just didn't have, they didn't have the skills to, you know, make me feel seen, make me feel heard.
But also, so Amy, some parents had to work, and it wasn't they were abandoning it all, as they were just trying to keep food on the table and the rent or the mortgage paid. So
exactly,
we interpreted it as a certain way, but it wasn't necessarily the right interpretation.
No. And unfortunately, what happened with me is that I took that on as me. I took that on as an identity, that I'm the one who's abandoned.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
as I say, I acted from it. And, subconsciously, I made sure that they'd leave me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd act in ways that made sure that they would leave me.
Mm.
Or I would end the relationship because I was so sure that they would end it eventually anyway. And it
Yeah.
really was destroying really, really good relationships. It was. And I would also do this with friends as well, where
Yeah.
I would end friendships. But once I healed that, what happened with the relationship, I didn't need to do anything outside of me. I didn't need to do anything with the relationship. I just healed me. But by healing me, I acted different. I showed up differently. I didn't show up as the person that would be abandoned anymore. I showed up as the person who was secure, who felt safe in relationships, who was
Yeah.
worthy of long-term commitment, who was worthy of love. And when we do this, when we understand that taking responsibility, what it really means is that it actually gives you freedom. It's not this thing where you're taking on blame or you're taking on, oh my God, it's all my fault. What it's actually doing is giving you your power back. It's giving you freedom to go after the relationship that you want because you know where it went wrong. You
Yeah.
know how to heal yourself.
That's
And
it.
the relationship that you want and the relationship you deserve is on the other side of this healing, on the other side of this taking responsibility. I'm not saying it's easy. Sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes it is hard to think, oh my God, I've really hurt somebody because of my
Yeah.
perception of a situation that wasn't true. And,
Yeah.
it's hard to sit with that sometimes. But, you don't want to do that again. So sit with it and understand it and think to yourself, okay, yes, I did do that. Yes, it was a traumatized part of me that came up. But what would I do differently next time
Yeah.
to make sure
Yeah.
that that didn't happen again?
Yeah.
And so taking responsibility is actually giving you freedom. It's
Yeah.
actually giving you the control back. It's putting the ball back in your court, not giving the ball out to everybody, giving the ball out to your ex, giving the ball out to your current partner. You take the ball is in your court then, and you have the control over what you choose to do with it. You can choose to heal it and let it go, and let go of the patterns associated with it, or you can keep it and carry on in the same cycle as you have been doing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's as simple as, which road do you want to go down?
And I think, like you said, the more you go back and heal the inner child where it all originated from, the more it loosens its grip on what's happening today. You don't get as triggered, or if you get triggered, you go, oh, there it is. I don't need to say anything. I just need to let that emotion pass through because it's not as, the voltage of it is less because I did the inner child work. So let me just breathe, relax, release, and let it, oh, there you are again. But I'm not going to let you, the inner child is the one that makes those comments about, why are you going? Or why didn't you contact me? Or why didn't you contact me more? Or you're not, whatever enough, or whatever, that all that dialogue that comes from the inner child, still trying to get the love from the parent that it never got. And people don't really appreciate being put in that role of you wanting them to be a parent to you. It's too much of a foot on the back of their neck. And often, as we know, people go away. If you keep doing it, they go away. And we don't want that. So if we can deal with this, as we're talking about it today, and get away from what we were kind of laughing at before we started recording, I'm sure it's them, it's not me, like you really believe that. You really believe it's not me. They just don't give enough and they're selfish and all this stuff. And their commitment, I hear they don't want a commitment. They're emotionally unavailable. They're players. I hear these from women, especially women. I do hear it from men too, but the majority of these comments I hear from women. And it's like we project that onto somebody and then we end up getting not what we want. and it's a very unpleasant interaction, and it can be really fractured, like that hot cold scenario that you were talking about. So it's like the more you work on this, the less of that you get, the toxic patterns where you go, here we go again, it's happening to me again, and then you go into that panic again. And you can free yourself of this. I mean, you and I are living examples that even though we have abandonment in our history, it doesn't mean that we have to keep reoccurring this pattern for ourselves. And you and I have done quite a bit of work on
it doesn't mean that it has to define who you are. It doesn't. It's just that, because especially if it was sort of frequent when you were growing up, it is easy to take on that identity. But when you understand that it is just that traumatized part of you that believes it, then you can, as you say, let it be there without letting it take control. And the more you see the evidence on the outside, the more that part of you is going to feel reassured, because when you can see that it works, when you can see that this behavior is actually becoming less and less and less and less, you know, that part of you is going to start getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And I think a big thing that really helped me realize this, because I think loving your inner child, I was really resistant to this, because I think someone said to me, imagine what I think it might have been one of your YouTube videos actually, that said, imagine what your inner child looks like. And I did. And I thought, well, how do I feel about this part of me? And actually, I didn't feel great about it at all. I thought, right, okay, let me love you so that you go away. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to get rid of that part of me that was destroying everything. And I think what I thought was I could somehow get rid of it so that it wasn't there anymore. But the more I did the meditations, the more I understood that actually this child's with me wherever I go. I can't get it's part of me. And you know, why would I want to get rid of something that's part of me, something that has made me who I am today? And you know, I just imagined me and a child saying to me, I'm there, I'm here wherever you go, please don't forget me. And from then I thought, right, okay, I know what this part of me needs. It just needs to be heard. And by you, like you say, you see it, you observe it, you let it pass, you let that part of you be seen, heard, and understood. Which is really what your inner child wants. It just wants to be seen, it just wants to be understood and protected. So I think sort of the inner child part of this, the inner child as part of your shadow, is so pivotal to this journey, because it's actually the part of you that's holding most of the puzzle pieces that you feel like you're missing.
That's true. And it remembers things that you don't remember. It's I think the inner child work, and you don't have to go to someone to do inner child work. I used to think, I have to go to a therapist that does inner child work. It's like, no, you can, when you're having an emotion, sit and write it out. And, you know, if you feel angry, scream into a pillow, go for a run, go to the gym, hit the punching bag. If you feel hurt, wrap yourself up in a blanket, lay on your bed, get cozy, get warm, and allow the inner child to, you know, process the hurt or the grief or the rejection, whatever it is. And then you move through it. You're not hanging on to it like that, because that's what causes the blockages, is you going, no, or you have a big explosion and then you totally annihilate someone on the outside because you can't contain your stuff. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people in prison because they've had stuff explode and they couldn't contain themselves, you know. I mean, matters of the heart and crimes of passion is not an uncommon thing. So the more you do this, it helps you to not end up with really horrible circumstances that you then got to pedal your way out of.
And you know, you mentioned rejection, and rejection was a feeling that had followed me around for decades. You know, the feeling of rejection, or the fear that I was going to get rejected. And you know, I genuinely did think, gosh, I can't survive that feeling. I won't survive that feeling. I won't survive the pain of it. So I'm just going to avoid it where possible.
Yes.
But I was still rejected, regardless of
Yeah.
how much I tried to avoid it. But actually, it's the understanding that, you know, me as an adult, of course, I can handle rejection. Of course, yes, it's painful, but I would survive it.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of the things, particularly in relationships, that people are afraid of, like abandonment, like being left, like rejection, come from that part of you, come from the inner child.
Yeah.
So the more that you try and avoid these things, the more power you're actually giving to that shadow side, that inner child. You're giving it more power, because what you're actually saying is, okay, I believe you. I
Yeah.
believe that this is how things are.
Yeah.
When, you know, really the feelings are valid, your inner child is valid, but just because it's valid doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you said at the beginning, you know, your feelings of being criticized were valid, but it wasn't the truth.
It wasn't the truth. No. But it took quite a while to see that, you know. And sadly, I wasn't able to tell my father that. But I mean, I told him in meditation and let it go, because I thought, how sad that he would have thought I'm trying to help my daughter and she just thinks she's just angry. Like he's kind of like, oh, you know. So, and you know, then you have moments of regret, because I regret doing that, but I didn't have the knowledge I have today. I regret that could have been a nice moment for my dad and I to do the weeding together, and it wasn't. It was a shit fight. So he felt bad, I felt angry, and then he was like bewildered, like I'm trying to help, and then this is what you do. So it was something that could have been so different. But of course, it's always hindsight. You look back later and you go, well, I'm not going to beat myself up. I was where I was at that time. I still had some more emotions to process. And now I understand. Now I know better. I can do better. And it's to, even when someone's dead, to let them know. I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, until we get to the other side, we're not going to know whether they hear it or not. But why not try and you know, extend the olive branch anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say then, Agnes, is the biggest benefit of this sort of work that you found?
Feeling more at peace with yourself, less chasing of the bright, shiny object of love or attention or reassurance, or needing, you know, 5 phone calls a week to feel that someone loves you. So it's letting go of external proof of love more and being more in your own state of love, and then being able to overflow that in your interactions with people. And just, I think the days, the weeks, the months, you're so much more comfortable in your own skin. It's you're not going, oh, what can I do? How can I change this? What can I external focus? It's like, no, the work's internal. You've got this. You've got this feeling of jealousy. You've got this feeling of fear of abandonment. The abandonment hasn't happened, but you got a fear of it. Okay. Whatever it is, you go, ooh, there it is. There's your old thing. There's the old self. Let me sit. Let me allow that part of me to write it out, light a candle, put some nice music on, and make that an hour or an hour and a half of your time. And then you offload maybe some old emotion, and then you go, now I'm freer again. So that used to be something that was, say, something to do at least once a month, if not more, because the emotions were coming up more regularly. Whereas now it's like over the years, that's maybe 2 or 3 times a year at the most. So you just have way more calm and less blips on the little scale there. And it's, you enjoy life more. You have a quiet life. You have a life where you don't need attention like you used to. It's more of it's a spiritual maturity, I think, Amy. You're spiritually
It is,
mature.
and all the things that you've just mentioned, And when we come back to the inner child, by accepting that inner child, that is what real self-love is. Because when you look at your inner child and, you know, really ask yourself, does this child look like they don't deserve love? Does this child look like they're a disappointment?
Yeah.
Does this child look like they're unwit? You will say no, of course they don't, because it's a child.
That's right.
And by, I suppose, through the process of I suppose, reparenting, that is what real self-love is, by accepting those parts of yourself, like you had to do. You had to accept that part of yourself that rejected your dad's help, by understanding that that was just where you're operating from at the time. And
yeah,
you know, that's what true self-love is. And I think when you understand that, you know, there is a place for affirming, but there's got to be a balance between affirming for what you want and also healing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a balance, as with everything in the world. There's polarity, isn't there? There's, you know, one foot in now and one foot in where you want to go.
Yeah. Until the day you pop off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It gets
so
so
if
much
anybody's
easier. It doesn't it, Amy? It gets easier.
It does. It becomes automatic.
Yes.
It becomes automatic. It isn't something that you have to think about anymore.
Yeah.
You see it, you know, the more you know yourself and the more you become familiar with how you're feeling, the more you check in with yourself every day, you will recognize, oh, okay, what's this? What's this that's coming up? What's this feeling of anxiety? What's this contraction?
Yeah.
Let me see what it is, so that I can heal it and let it go.
Yeah.
Rather than just, oh gosh, I feel bad. Let me imagine.
Yeah.
And, you know, it doesn't. And I've personally felt that my manifestation journey has become a lot easier because of this as well, because I believe in myself a lot more now. I love myself a lot more. I see myself as somebody that's worthy and deserving of the things that I want now, whereas I didn't before, which made manifesting my relationship in particular really, really hard.
Yes.
But now that I've done, you know, a lot of healing around my attachments, for one, my attachment style was a huge one, and around what my beliefs on love, my beliefs on them, my beliefs on relationship were, actually there isn't a lot of work to do now, because the work's been done. The relationship is secure. The relationship is solid. I'm not sitting there afraid that he's going to leave me.
Yeah.
You know, and even if he did, I would be fine. I'm not saying I'd be happy. But I would be okay. It wouldn't be the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wouldn't mean that I was unlovable. It wouldn't mean that I was unworthy. It'd just be that the relationship ended. But yeah, I think once you understand what the benefits of this are, it makes your healing work sort of a lot less intimidating, I think.
Yes, well said. Yeah, exactly. And you know that every time you offload some more stuff from the body suitcase, that you feel lighter, you feel hopeful, you feel the light comes back on in your eyes, and you feel that when you are out with people that you can really listen to people, because you're not like listening with your own agenda going, oh yeah, I had that, so I need to tell them my bit. You can listen to people and not feel the need to bring yourself into it all the time, which when you've got a whole bunch of stuff, you do that, where you just want to jump in and say your side of it, whoever you're talking to. So you kind of, over time, the more you do this healing, the less you feel the need to be heard, the less you feel the need for reassurance, the less you need some validation from someone, especially in a romantic sexual relationship. You don't need the validation like you used to. So it's like you're spiritually maturing on the topic of relationships the more you do your inner child work.
Exactly. So if you're sitting there waiting for a text from somebody, for example, and instead of staring at the phone, ask yourself, what does this remind me of?
Yeah.
What is this telling me? What am I making it mean about myself?
Yeah.
Go in and heal it, because I certainly, I was one of these people that did constantly check the phone,
Yeah.
and that was sitting there, waiting for a message. And I genuinely did believe that, I won't be happy until I hear from this person. I did believe that.
Yes.
But now, no, it just doesn't register. If someone doesn't text, it just doesn't even register with me now. Because
Yeah.
I'm not looking at that communication as validation, as the proof that I'm important, the proof that I'm prioritized. Because actually, by doing the healing work, I've proven that I am to myself. I've proven that I can prioritize myself, and I've given all of those things that a text message would have given me those years ago. I've given all that to myself now, so it doesn't even register.
Yeah. And this, everybody that's listening, is what you have to look forward to, is being free of being obsessed with, I need that from the outside to make me feel good on the inside. And you learn to, as you release the inner child's emotions on abandonment, rejection, brokenheartedness, feeling that you don't matter, that you're not important, that you're not seen or heard. Once you clear that for yourself more and more and more, you will be seen, you will be heard, but then you don't need it. It's like, people will say, oh, would you want to say something about that? No, I don't really need to say anything, because you've processed it enough that you don't feel the need to tell the story anymore. And the only time you do tell the story is when you're in a situation where you're wanting to help someone who's still in it.
Exactly. And just to finish this off, like a really, really good example of this was when I was manifesting my partner to move in with me.
Yeah.
And when I first started manifesting this, it seemed like it was an impossibility, in that he was actually telling me that I am never going to live with you.
Yeah.
He was certain that he was never going to live with me. But actually what I thought was, okay. And I just said that to him, okay then. And I left it, and I thought, right, okay, what within me is causing this? What is this making me feel about me? And all of this unworthiness came up. The fact that I've been divorced made me feel like I was no longer worthy of a committed relationship, that I was damaged goods, that because I've been left, I was second best.
Yeah.
And that I just wasn't good enough for him to make that big decision and make the leap. But the more I healed that within, things started to change on the outside. So the first thing that happened is that he said, why don't we do a trial a month of us living together? That was the first thing that happened, that I saw the shift happening. I was like, oh, okay then, yeah, let's do that. And within a week of him living with me, because it sort of made it so it was normal for me to feel like I was living with him, because I'd imagined it so much.
Yeah.
Then a week after that, he got the estate agents around valuing his house. And this was probably last September. And then by the February, his house was sold. And I didn't do anything on the outside. I didn't do anything other than leave it alone and go within and remind myself that there isn't anything that's making me unworthy. I have had experiences in my past that made it mean that I'm unworthy. So the more I went in and more I healed, the momentum built.
Yeah.
And, in the end, actually, by leaving it alone and just doing the inner work, it was much more simple than what I had been doing, which was affirming, which was imagining constantly, having things on a loop 24 hours a day and not healing. So I know that when people say the inner healing, and it sounds like it's long, it sounds like it's, it's this big thing that you've got to do that's going to take ages. It's not. It doesn't take ages. In fact, it didn't take me that long at all. So it took September, October, November, December. So 6 months it took me to have from him not living with me to him living with me. And I'd been trying for 4 years before that. I'd been trying for 4 years.
Yeah.
to have that happen. So if you are resistant to the healing, just remind yourself that actually what you think is the long way is actually the short way. It's actually the way that's going to get you permanent results that are stable, that that you are ready for, rather than affirming for a text message. Because if you look deep down, it isn't the text message that you really want. What you really want is to feel a priority to somebody.
Yeah, and connected. Yeah, for sure. Nice. I'm glad you shared that, because that, I think, is a situation a lot of people will relate to, is trying to get someone, or even trying to talk to them, can we move in together? We've been together X amount of time. It's time that we, and then the guy goes, because you still got the same energy about it, which is, once you're living with me, I'll feel more secure. Well, it's not. You got to feel more secure and give that to the relationship, rather than trying to get it from him. And that's a big jump. But like you said, it just happened on its own. Once you did the inner work, the external just shifted into gear.
Yeah, and it was so much easier.
Yeah.
It was so much easier. There wasn't any ups and downs. There wasn't any roller coaster.
Yeah.
It was just super. It just all fell into place.
Very nice. Well, fantastic. Is there anything else that you want to share before we kind of wrap it up, Amy? Anything else come to mind?
Not on this subject, no, but I've enjoyed speaking about it. This one's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I could talk about shadow work and healing all day long.
Yeah. Well, we said we're going to do another video going more into inner child and shadow work for people that are still here listening to this now. We're going to really hone in on that bullseye of the target for the next one. And for anyone that wants to find you, I will put the links down below for how you can find Amy, talk to her, go to her for coaching, whatever it is. She is available for you to talk to. So down in the description below will be all her details. And I hope you enjoyed this discussion, especially those of you that have been working on a lot of imagining or affirming, or those of you that are going through the inner child work and you're kind of a bit bogged down with it, because it does get, a bit heavy and hard sometimes. But just know, the more you do it, the more you'll pop out into the sunlight again, because it is really the most important work to have good relationships. That Amy and I were saying, if you don't do this work, you're going to default back to your old patterns again and again and again. And you can't affirm or imagine that away. You just can't ice the rotten cake, as they say. So thank you, Amy, for coming. And
you're welcome.
We will be seeing each other again. And do you want to say bye to everyone before we go?
Yes, bye everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And as Agnes says, she'll put my links below, and send me an email if you want to discuss it even further. If you want some help or assistance, send me an email and I'm happy to help.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And I will put some other videos about abandonment, fear of abandonment, how to get rid of abandonment, and all other related playlists and YouTubes on this topic down below for you. Lots of love, and I will see you as always in the next YouTube.